Good afternoon, everybody. This is a live severe weather briefing, finally, and it's a very conditional threat for severe weather. Looks like the later portion of next week, a Wednesday to Thursday type of a trough ejection, and many of the GFS members do not show this severe weather event materializing, and the European model doesn't have it at all. And the GFS does have a tendency on showing these deeper waves in the long range, and then as you get closer, it is a little bit more sheared out. I do expect there to be some winter weather, though, on the northwest side of this system, probably some severe weather in the mid-south as well. And this is the kicker system that should trigger a pattern shift that should bring some more snow into the Mountain West and places like Colorado. I know it's been a record-breaking late start to the snow season. Places like Denver, the mountains in Colorado, and other portions of the Mountain West are definitely suffering for snowfall. Wildfires last night in Montana, that town of Denton, Montana, up there, definitely had to be evacuated as that fire burnt through the town. And there's also some active wildfires here in western North Carolina, Pilot Mountain. There's another active wildfire outside of Marion yesterday. So we definitely need the rainfall here in the southeastern U.S. and the Carolinas. And some of the models, including the 6Z GFS, are showing this deeper trough ejection across portions of the Mid-South. And that's what we're going to be breaking down here during this live briefing. That yellow area does have the potential for severe weather that I'm watching very closely. I definitely am going to chase it if there is a threat of severe weather, and even if there is a threat of winter weather on the backside, I'm going to chase that as well. And this does look like it's going to usher in a pattern shift in the long range toward the middle of December. Another system comes in on the heels of this one and tries to close off a bit over the southern plains, at least in the very long range. And I do think that that could bring some big-time snow in portions of the Mountain West, and it's definitely much-needed snow out there as well. And we're going to break down these models, of course. The GFS is the most exciting model right now in terms of severe weather and storm chasing, and that's the one that we are going to break down here with this trough ejection. There you can see that trough ejection on the 6Z GFS. So this is on about early afternoon, late morning on Thursday, but you don't want to get too focused in on the timing here because so much is likely going to change, and I'm going to tell you why. But you can definitely see that it's ushering in this pattern change. The jet is sagging back to the south, closer to the Pacific Northwest. Locations like California starting to get that plume of moisture off the Pacific. Should bring some rainfall as well further south into the U.S. Portion of the Pacific Northwest. I know that British Columbia has been getting hammered with big-time precipitation and snowfall in the mountains with that atmospheric river event. Flooding, debris flows out there as well. But now that atmospheric river, that active polar front jet stream is going to be sagging south finally into the U.S. So there was a wildfire in December here in Montana. That's because that jet has been so far to the north into southern Canada. It's been a pretty boring pattern for weather enthusiasts, but it does look like that's going to change in the middle portion of December. There's that trough ejection Nice neutrally tilted trough upon exit there of the southern plains. You'd like to see a little bit more flow on the backside, but by this time in the southeastern Great Plains, ejecting across the mid-south, I'm okay when there's not a ton of flow on the backside and the trough is done deepening but is starting to eject across the mountains and spreading those favorable kinematics over a large warm sector over the mid-south, lower Mississippi River Valley. Could be impacted Wednesday night. Nocturnal events spreading east across portions of the mid-south and even eventually arriving here in the Carolinas, hopefully bringing with it some much needed rainfall. But this is a very uncertain pattern. You've got this little bowling ball of an upper level storm system that's just going to sit there and spin over Baja California through this weekend, just meandering over northern Mexico. And then eventually that thing ejects ahead of this pattern shift. So the trough finally comes in as that jet starts to sag south during the early portion of next week. And look at this little bowling ball sitting there over Baja California. Not a great time to visit Cabo San Lucas this weekend into the early next week. You're just going to have that bowling ball of an upper level storm system sitting over Baja, causing cloudiness, unsettled weather. And then here's the system coming into the Pacific Northwest. A lot of flow on the backside. This is going to be a potent storm system Monday afternoon, Monday evening. Big storm here along the coastline of Washington, Oregon. I'm sure some of our Pacific Northwest storm chasing friends are going to be excited about that. Look at all this flow on the backside. That is a deepening system right there. When you get that flow on the backside of that system, of a storm system like this, an upper level trough, that thing is diving south. Shear vorticity along the base of the trough, causing the trough to deepen in amplitude. You still have this little bowling ball here spinning over northern Mexico. And this thing, according at least to the 6Z GFS, is going to eject rapidly out ahead of this system. And this is the system that should cause severe weather over the mid-south, but it is a highly conditional event. You got that bowling ball that ejects over the southern U.S. out ahead of that system by Wednesday morning. Maybe that'll clear the way for this actual system to eject from the southern plains and across the mid-south for severe weather, but it is highly uncertain whether that system sits there and spins over northern Mexico and ejects as a stronger wave. Clearing out the warm sector out ahead of this system could happen. Looks like, though, it's just going to shear out as a little jet streak, and that's not going to influence the moisture return out of the Gulf of Mexico too much for this system. And then by Wednesday night into Thursday morning, nice veered low-level jet out there. You're going to have a lot of directional shear with this type of a shape to the trough ejection across the southern U.S. You get basically due southerly winds at the low levels, and then you flip around to a southwesterly wind with that low-level jet. And the moisture situation as well we can take a look at. I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem with that bowling ball of a system over northern Mexico ejecting out, shearing out basically as more of a jet streak than anything by Wednesday morning out ahead of that system. You still have this reservoir here of 70 dew points, untainted Gulf of Mexico. That's the key to bringing that moisture northward out ahead of these storm systems. You definitely want to have an untainted Gulf of Mexico here. You want to have that reservoir of 70s dew points just sitting down there, and that overspreads the mid-south in the form of mid to upper 60s dew points by Thursday morning. And you don't want to get too focused on the exact details and the timing, but at least this 6Z run of the GFS is showing a nocturnal severe weather event beginning along that I-10 corridor, southeastern Texas on Wednesday night, maybe Wednesday evening as well, and then overspreading central and southern Louisiana during the night, overnight on Wednesday night, as that coastal front starts to invade the southern U.S. But that moisture signal right there, at least on this 6Z GFS, is quite favorable for some type of severe weather, whether it's probably going to be more of a nocturnal event than anything. This is the 0Z GFS last night, still showing that nice reservoir of moisture there. Wednesday night, first near southeastern Texas, then southern into central Louisiana, and then look at that moisture being pumped northward out ahead of that system as well. And that's because that bowling ball of a storm system over northern Mexico that sits there for days just ejects like a little jet streak, doesn't impede the Gulf of Mexico too much. And look at this low-level jet Wednesday evening. This is big time, everybody. This is from last night's GFS run. So if this happens, this is going to be a significant severe weather event, but it's a big if. Big if on if it happens, but what the hell else are we going to talk about right now with this boring weather pattern? You can even just kind of cherry pick some soundings here. Very favorable photographs anywhere you look within that low-level jet with 40 to 50 knot southwesterlies just above the ground. A lot of directional shear too. Those due southerlies near the surface, southwesterly low-level jet. And then aloft, you get those west-southwesterly, due southwesterlies in the mid to upper troposphere up there. And that creates that directional shear. And you can definitely see that very favorable photograph. Let me shrink my head a little bit. And then you'll be able to see that photograph more clearly. And look at that wind shear. These large looping photographs are very favorable for tornadoes. That area within the photograph curve contained within the storm motion vector and the shear vectors here that comprise the photograph, that's proportional to your storm relative helicity there. Basically, that wind shear that's available to the storm that helps that ingestion of streamwise vorticity at the low levels of the storm. And you can see here, your 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity in excess of 300 with this sounding. A lot of surface-based instability as well. A little bit of an elevated mix layer with this favorable shape to that trough ejection. A dry layer of air there just above the ground in the middle troposphere. And that's a 60-plus knot low-level jet that ejects across the south. Let's take a look and see how the 6Z run evolves. Yeah, not quite as favorable with the intermediary run, but looking at the 500 millibars, I still like that trough ejection in the 6Z run. The 12Z run, I think, will probably shift a little bit back toward the 0Z run last night. The European model doesn't show this at all. You look at the European model, and it shows a much more progressive system, basically out of the Mid-South by this time, by Wednesday evening. It has a stronger lead system ejecting out of northern Mexico and just a completely different pattern. Look at this ridging aloft here at 500, and that kind of shows you the uncertainty associated with this, even within about a week or so. What is the day today? I think it's Thursday today, so that is about a week out. So now that we're starting to get closer to this event, confidence should begin to increase a bit with this trough ejection. But definitely the most favorable run is the operational GFS. There are a couple ensemble members that even show a deeper trough ejection than this one is showing, but definitely something to watch in terms of severe weather. I'll likely be chasing this event as well if this materializes. But then again, the European model doesn't show it at all. The GFS does show it, of course. That's what we're looking at right now. And all of this depends on the timing of that intense cyclone that's going to make landfall, likely western Washington, western Oregon. I would say that the confidence in that system is quite high. But the confidence of the intermodulation between that bowling ball of a closed upper low in northern Mexico and that intense system that's ejecting, the interplay between those two systems and how it might impact that stream of moisture northward from the Gulf of Mexico really is what's going to determine whether or not this severe weather event happens. And I know that there could be some severe weather as well associated with this, but definitely, some winter weather on the northwest side of this. You're getting a lot of moisture injected into this system, and that's going to contribute to a well-developed deformation zone as well with this. Somewhere across the Midwest is going to get hammered by a decent snowstorm like this, weather weenies. Anytime you get this reservoir of moisture down here in the Gulf of Mexico, and you get a nice mid-latitude cyclone, it's going to pull that moisture northward, and somewhere on the northwest side of this system, maybe it's going to be central Illinois, maybe St. Louis, maybe a little bit further north, the deformation zone of this surface low, someone's going to get a decent snow band up there on the northwest side with severe weather in the warm sector of this mid-latitude cyclone. Maybe Detroit, maybe a little bit to the south of there, northwestern Ohio, that Toledo strip there could get an interesting snow event from this as well, and the system's going to be dying with time as it moves off to the northeast. So this one's going to peak. This snow event could peak a little bit further west, but again, it's way too early to tell. But you do have a mid-latitude cyclone that is forecast to lift off to the northeast in association with this shortwave trough, at least according to the GFS model. That's a decent trough ejection right there, with that lead system kind of getting muddled up and just ejecting northeast as more of a jet streak over top the subtropical ridge over the southeastern U.S. This system's probably going to bring some snow as well to the mountains there of Colorado. Loveland maybe could bring some snow to the Texas Panhandle as well, southern high plains. This is on Wednesday afternoon and evening, and you get that surface low that gradually develops, and then the nocturnal severe weather event should begin southeastern Texas, portions of central and southern Louisiana, at least with this scenario here. And then you're going to start to pull that cold air southward. There's that 540 line here in the central U.S. Not a bad proxy for where that snow is going to happen. Of course, it's a little different in the Pacific Northwest, given the maturity of those upper-level storm systems that arrive up there. You need a little bit lower heights to bring that snow down to the surface in the Pacific Northwest. And here is that severe weather event. Portions of the Mid-South, central, southern Mississippi. This is going to be Wednesday evening here on this ejection. Not a ton of cold air available for that system as it lifts off to the northeast. But I think there's going to be a snow event on the northwest side of that low, if there's severe weather at least. But boy, it doesn't bring down that cold air for that system at all, does it? At least in the 0Z GFS. But I would think that there's going to be a nice swath of snow here on the northwest side of this system, but it's just been too warm. That jet stream way off to the north here. Not much in the way of these Arctic air mass intrusions with this system. And that's why I think that the middle part of December could be pretty active here in portions of the Mid-South for severe weather. You got this system that's going to eject, it looks like, the middle to later portion next week, at least according to the GFS model. And then you get this next system coming in here with that cold PDO. We should have the tendency for this western U.S. trough, or at least the encouragement for that to happen. Here over the last week, though, we have had that pattern shift with more of an evolution of a ridge trough pattern, with that polar front jet stream going way up into southern Canada, bringing with it wildfires and whatnot across Montana. But here, as we're starting to get toward the middle portion of December, look at this pattern shift starting to materialize. Another big time, high amplitude, large scale Rossby wave there. And this one's probably going to eject as well over the southern plains. Could bring it with it a threat of tornadoes across portions of the Mid-South. More snow as well here across the Mountain West. Colorado could get a decent event like this. And look at this, at least in Fantasyland, it tries to close off another upper level system there down into the southern plains and eject it. So we do have this tendency of a western U.S. trough to form in the long range through the middle portion of December. And I think that's going to bring at least a couple episodes of severe weather to the Mid-South, maybe some snow as well to the Midwest. This is a very favorable pattern for these surface lows, ejecting toward the Great Lakes and portions of the Midwest to get a pretty good snowfall. You definitely want to kind of hand wave a little bit with these systems, because you've got this closed upper low here over Baja, Mexico. You got this big system diving south out of the Pacific Northwest after creating a pretty big windbag event over western Washington, western Oregon, and even bringing some snow into portions of northern California. This system's going to bring snow as well to the Mountain West. This is a pretty textbook pattern coming in from the northwest here. Those western-facing slopes, the ski resorts out there, Colorado, as well as Utah, here could get pretty hammered by this system. A disturbance in that moist northwesterly flow off the Pacific, getting anchored near the Four Corners there by Tuesday. So I think that's going to bring a nice shot of snow here for the mountains of Colorado, even New Mexico. And you can kind of see this complex interplay between that closed upper low across northern Mexico and that system diving south out of the Pacific Northwest. If it's able to retain that vorticity at the base of that trough, I think it's going to be more favorable for the severe weather across the Mid-South. But if this system kind of ejects out ahead of it with any amplitude, then it could just temporarily mitigate the flow of moisture northward out of the Gulf of Mexico toward the middle portion of next week, and that would lead to a little bit lesser chance of severe weather. But if it pivots this thing around the base of the trough, helping to deepen that thing, and then it just kind of shears off as a little jet streak by Wednesday evening, that's the severe weather event. So last night's GFS shows that closed upper low over northern Mexico ejecting in tandem with the parent system. But then you look at the 6Z model, and it basically fluffs that little upper level low out of northern Mexico as a hardly identifiable jet streak out ahead of the parent system. I tend to believe the 0Z model a little bit more. Usually these upper level storm systems, these blobs, bowling balls of cold air aloft that you see down here, usually are able to retain their identity a little bit longer than the models are able to identify. And I think that these two systems here will likely eject in tandem, bring it with it, increase severe weather, basically pivoting this bowling ball along the base of the trough, ejecting it over the southern plains and across the Mid-South. And if that evolution happens, then I think that we're going to be talking about a pretty substantial severe weather event. If it doesn't happen, though, then possibly a snowstorm over the Midwest, but still highly uncertain. European model doesn't show it at all, but the European model has been kind of slacking here recently. And I think that the GFS is a superior model now, even though it has been hinting at this threat of severe weather across the Mid-South and the long range recently. And then we had this pattern shift with that ridge trough pattern west to east across the United States. It looks like we're going to have a pattern shift in the middle portion of December. Good news for the mountains of the western U.S. Good news for rainfall here as well over the southeastern U.S. But if this system doesn't dig into the Carolina Piedmont, then there's not going to be any relief for the drought conditions down here. And I would expect those fire conditions to continue across western North Carolina, western Carolinas, even down into upstate South Carolina, potentially, where it is quite dry. So thank you, everybody, for joining me for this weather report. We'll be breaking this down in the days to come, unless it falls apart, of course. I'm trying to get more regular with my live severe weather briefings as I'm starting to get more rested out here, given this pattern shift over the last 7 to 10 days. So I'm excited to getting back into the swing of things. Thank you, Facebook supporters, for powering these live briefings and my live storm chasing, everything across the board. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I look forward to having you in my passenger seat for years to come as we're storm chasing. You can see I'm wearing my new favorite shirt, the Gizmo tie-dye shirt this morning. My favorite hat, of course, the Flex Seal hat. Starts to get my musk in it as I wear it more and more often, and I become more and more attached to the hat. And definitely going to be doing some more modifications to my vehicle as well, putting another layer of that flex tape on the bumper of the Dominator 4, putting another layer on the top. And hell, I might just cover the whole vehicle with flex glue to try to serve as some protection when that hail comes in. That's starting to kind of put some cracks in the exterior of the Dominator 4. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in this Thursday morning. We're going to be keeping a close eye on this severe weather for the middle to later portion of next week. Never stop chasing.